Welcome to the Mimitoys and Puppets Ireland video podcast, learning through different voices and different eyes. In this series of video podcasts, I focus on learning, parenting, and education. Today, I will have a chat with Irene Regini about languages and language teaching and learning. Irene is an Italian, Latin, and Italian teacher, and she is multilingual with Italian, English, Latin, Greek, and French. Irene launched in 2017 Satura Lanx, which is a completely new and innovative module to learn Latin. Don't be taken aback and bear with me, as her methodologies and ways of approaching language learning is really engaging. Hi, Irene. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm so glad to see you and to talk to you because actually I'm a fan. I'm a fan of yours, and I'm a fan. I love Latin as a language, and I came across you because you have an amazing Latin module. So, and I thought it was also, I just wanted to talk to you about your approach and the methodology you have developed for learning Latin from beginners to advanced. And because I really believe that methodology can be, an example of how a language can be learned in a relaxed and, relaxed way. So can you tell me about how you started your language module methodology?
Yeah, hi. First, I'm really glad to be here, and thanks, Miriam, for the invitation. Yes, so I teach Latin and Italian too, and why one of my biggest inspirations in terms of approach are the natural method and comprehensible input. So I really focus on teaching the language in a way that's natural. I also draw inspiration by kids and the way they learn. So I think that adults can learn much more effectively if they don't focus on the grammar first, but if they read a lot and learn new words in context, and then there will be time to systematize and fixate the grammar rules. But I focus on teaching Latin through the text first, which is something rather uncommon, even if the teaching is shifting now, because usually, and especially in Italy and in Europe, I think, because in the USA, they're more focused on active methods. But in Italy, there's this so-called traditional method of teaching Latin by giving the rules first and then giving just super difficult sentences that students are supposed to translate with a dictionary. And of course, this is not
I think what you're describing for Italy is the same. I know my experience in France, or even here being in Ireland, it is all about rules, vocabulary, and then putting into context, which is where I think this is where it fails. It's hard to put into context and hence remember and hence speak at the end of the day.
Of course. And so I tend to reverse this order and start from the text. Of course, I like to adapt my own language and also the text I offer to my students to their level. So I think it's not useful to give beginners difficult texts about philosophy, or because it's like kids. We don't start speaking to them as if they were adults. We start with simple sentences, names, then we add complexity gradually. And so that's something I try to mimic with my method. I try to adapt my language to the level of students. So I tend to speak really slowly using only simple structures. And I don't banalize the language. I just try to simplify, but without denaturating the language, which is not easy. And I think the reason why not many teachers do so is that it's really difficult to teach simply, just to avoid complex structures.
Yeah, because I know I was listening to one of your podcasts where you explained how you came across this methodology of this different approach that you yourself by learning classical studies, so I think you've done Latin and Greek as well, but you realize it was such a pity not to be able to speak after so many years in third level education, that you could still not speak fluently the language. So that's what triggered that new methodology.
Yeah, in fact, I was lucky enough to have a teacher who was rather illuminated. So she used a sort of active approach. She used to do a mix of the more classical traditional methodology and an active approach. So this is what gave me initially the idea that we could speak Latin, because if one isn't exposed to examples, one just doesn't know that we can speak Latin today. So with this first experience, I moved on and I discovered that there was a community of Latin speakers that is growing by the day, also thanks to the internet. And I developed my own methodology based on actively speaking Latin, not just for the fun of it, even if it is fun, but mainly to allow students to read the texts fluently, because with Latin, the main goal usually is to read text.
Yeah. It's what you're saying. It just reminds me of in Ireland. So the Irish language is a European language, and it's compulsory in primary and secondary schools. And then I often hear, people saying it's either waste of time or I still can't say a word at the end of this 12 years, whatever. No, maybe 18 years of 12 years of learning, being exposed to language. And I've always wondered. It's the same with French. You hear the same when people, whatever, do French. And you're right in what you're saying about I remember the very good memories I have for either doing Latin or English at school was when it was put into the context. I remember in English we did songs. My teachers, we were doing George Michael songs. And in Latin, I remember it was a very modern text that we were doing that I could relate to, and I just think it's such a pity that it's a common complaint that languages are being taught in I don't know, it's not a moving way, it's very anchored. And in fact, the question I have for you, which might be controversial, I don't know, is do you think to teach a language, the teacher has to be fluent in that language?
Let's say that the teacher should be at least some steps ahead of the students. So if the teacher teaches beginners, she doesn't necessarily need to be really, really fluent, but she needs to be fluent enough to teach and to correct students if they make mistakes. And with the method I use, the great thing is that for teacher, they have the opportunity to learn as the student learn. So the book I use, Famiglia Romana, which is widespread and a great book, is really gradual. So it follow a sequential gradual addition of complexity. So the teacher can start learning along by the students. So of course she will be some steps ahead, because a good teacher should have made classical studies, or at least know the language very well from a passive perspective. And with this book, it's really easy for teachers to start to start speaking very simply, and then grow as the level of their students grow.
And what I like about, you've developed a huge module for learning Latin, Satura, Lanx, and it's the variety of the material that you provide, so you cater for different learners, as you were saying, from beginners to really advanced, but also you have short YouTube videos when you walk around your apartment or your house and you say, this is the table, kitchen, it's really lively. It gives the context once again. And then you have the readings of the classics, Cicero or Seneca. And then, for someone else. So I know for me, I jump from one to the other because it's fun. I don't understand everything, but I like the variety, of what you offer, which is amazing. So I know it must be a huge amount of work for you, Irene, but it shows that your approach caters for all learning needs and all learning levels, and all levels of interest, which is in a language. It's not only grammar and vocabulary, it's other stuff, their culture and everything. So I have to say.
Yeah, and of course we learn better when we listen or watch compelling content. So if one like cooking, I don't know, I would recommend watching videos in Latin about cooking. And today this is possible because there are many content creators. Some talk about cooking, some about sports, some they show their homes like I did. So it's more easy today. It's easier to find content that is compelling for us. And I try to make the same thing with literature because usually beginner programs don't offer possibilities to read actual literature. But I I came up with this tiered readers method, which means that I simplify in two passages a text, an actual text. So students have three different versions with increasing difficulty of literary text, which means they can read literature from the beginning, which is motivating for someone who learns Latin.
Absolutely. And what I really like, the little thing that you do, when you say, close your eyes, I'm going to read, and then get a feel for it. And this is, I suppose, because it suits me. It's the type of learner I am, so I have to say, it's amazing. Everything, everything that you've covered there. And I just had a final question, which I'm after forgetting. Yeah, sometimes parents would say, let's say in Irish there it's compulsory, etc. And there is sometimes a reluctance to say, adding an extra language is going to add too much work, or it's going to burden with too much in the head, focus on the key subject. So what would you say to parents who think, or maybe sending them, let's say, to an all-Irish school, that concern it will delay the kids, or whatever reason sometimes? What would you say to parents who are a bit reluctant?
Yeah, so honestly, I have two small kids. One is 3 year old, and the other one will be one in a few days. So I can see how kids learn the languages, and this is amazing. My eldest is just a sponge. She learns at a rate that is impossible for us adults. And so I'd say that it isn't a waste of time to expose young kids to different languages. I try to expose my daughters to other languages, Latin and French. However, I confess I'm not following the best practices. However, I would say that you shouldn't have the fear of too many languages, because kids' brains are made for this. They can discern languages and make differences. I know that for bilingual kids, sometimes when they are really young, they can mix up languages, but I also know that this fades up going on, and it only leaves richness. So I'd say that it would be a great gift to expose our children to different languages and cultures, of course.
Yeah. No, that's a lovely way of saying it. It's a lovely gift to give our children. So, Irene, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. There are so many questions I love to talk to you, but maybe we'll do another podcast.
Maybe another time. Yes.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
If you like what you've heard and want to find out more, please check the details here.